Hello, everybody. I'm Yolanda Arzola with Northern Nevada Marches Forward, and we're doing our Education Action Series with Eddy House today. And we're going to be talking about the unhoused neighbors and how we can help, how can the community help come together and help out with this problem, right? Haley, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Haley. I'm the outreach coordinator at the Eddy House. The Eddy House is it's a youth homeless shelter and resource center. We serve ages 18 to 24. Our primary service is our emergency shelter for folks who are living on the street or housing unstable. We also have a community living program, which is our longer-term living program that clients can apply for. And we also provide day services and different resources.
Awesome. So today, Haley, we're going to talk a little bit about homelessness and the difference between homelessness and unsheltered neighbors. And then hopefully we'll get some people coming in so if they have questions on how they can help and how we can come together, right? So let's start off with what is the difference between homelessness and the unhoused, and how is it an issue?
So I will use these terms interchangeably as we're speaking. Homelessness mostly refers to someone who is quite literally homeless. They live on the street, they live, maybe in an encampment somewhere. They have nowhere to go. Unhoused can mean housing unstable, so maybe that means living in a hotel or a motel, couch surfing, or, are homeless intermittently.
So I guess it would be fair to say, to be more compassionate, to use maybe unhoused instead of somebody that's homeless will make you a little bit more humble and probably more considerate of the person's feelings, right? Even though it's a reality, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah, that is completely true. The term homelessness can carry a lot of, derogatory weight, and it's. I'm trying to incorporate and encourage person-first language. So an individual who is unhoused, keeping their humanity in mind.
Awesome. And then, are there any initiatives available to prevent unhoused neighbors?
So the city of Reno and Washoe County both have some rental assistance programs where folks who are experiencing financial hardship can apply and get assistance with rent. Eddy House, actually, for folks who are 18 to 24, we have what is called our diversion program. And the idea with this program is to be able to financially assist someone to prevent them from entering the shelter system. So with our diversion program, we can assist with things like car repair, gas assistance, some rental assistance. Essentially, we can cover a wide range of financial concerns that might prevent someone from paying their rent and have them end up unhoused.
Yes, this is very true. Unfortunately, sometimes you're stuck with the decision to either pay food or to pay for, having a house over your head, a roof over your head. So unfortunately, that's the dilemmas that some of us have to go through. But that's really good that the Eddy House offers that. Is there any other, so the city of Reno has it too, they help with rental assistance. So these are really good preventative measures too for individuals to look out for to avoid getting to that point, right?
Right, correct.
And then what do you see contributing to homelessness in our community?
So I see a variety of things contributing. I would say the biggest one right now is the rising housing cost. So rent prices just keep going up. That is contributing a lot to folks having no choice but to live outside. It's hard to support yourself on your own. So if you're a single individual and you're working full time, it's very easy to become financially insecure. One big event that causes you to have to pay a bunch of money and then you don't have rent, right? So Rising housing costs are probably the number one issue for why folks are becoming unhoused. Second to that is the pandemic. So the data shows in the last 3 years that in Reno, our unsheltered neighbors are growing, right? We have more folks who, there are a variety of reasons, maybe lost their job because of the pandemic, family members getting sick and having to take care of them and they couldn't work. Several instances where COVID has affected folks and their ability to maintain housing. And then the other thing that I think people don't think about as much is trauma. Too often I hear stories about folks who had a spouse that they lost from either death or divorce. Medical concerns that people go through. They end up having to pay a lot of money in medical bills and end up on the street. Really traumatic life events and a lack of support system around those also contribute to homelessness.
And when you say lack of support system, are you talking about like your loved ones or more in the community?
I think both. Right, so maybe some people don't have too much family, or maybe they're new to Reno and they don't know anyone here, things like that. So, if you find yourself alone, it's a lot easier to end up on the street.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then I know that I was reading somewhere about this, where there's just simply not enough housing either. I mean, we have the skyrocketing rent, and then not enough housing because we have 2 to 3 families in one household to maintain that rent. And then on top of that, there's just no space. So it's a really sad thing to even think about that,
Absolutely.
And then what would you say are some of the psychological effects of homelessness?
So I'd like to preface this by saying, I've never had the experience of being unhoused. So this is just what I have learned in my, time as doing outreach for Eddy House. The stories I've heard. But some of the psychological effects that I've noticed and that have been shared with me, people who live outside often deal with anxiety, deal with depression. Again, I'm not a mental health professional, but a lot of folks living outside end up developing PTSD and other concerns, simply because the stress of being unhoused is incredible. It's a lot to deal with. And also, your self-esteem, your confidence, those things, it's very hard to maintain those things when you're unhoused.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that it's just a lot of times, especially with that stigma that our community or different cultures have, we don't even realize that there are psychological behaviors that can be self-harming us, right?
Right.
Let's see, we have it. I would imagine not having a lock or a place for your things would be exhausting. You would never be able to go to sleep all the way. Yeah. Like, you, especially if you have mementos or the last things that you have, the things that you have that are sentimental value, you imagine losing them, and then now you don't have anything. That can really be hard on your psyche for that. So what is the average age of unsheltered neighbors that you are seeing? I know that you work with the 18 to 24 community. So that specifically with Eddy House, you'll see a different range, but we're talking about or community wide. Do you know?
Yeah. So in my experience going out into the community, I'm going to give a broad range here, but the average is somewhere between 25 and 45. Mm-hmm. That is the majority of folks that I see outside.
And then are you at full capacity with Eddy House, or is it how do you see the turnaround with individuals going in and coming out and everything?
Yeah, so we have not reached capacity yet at Eddy House. I've been told by my bosses, don't worry about capacity if we're not going to turn people away. If need be, we can turn our conference room into an overflow. We have various overflow spaces that we can convert. As far as turnaround, we do see folks come in and out of the shelter. They're 18 to 24, they're still figuring it out. But we are just, I'm grateful that we're at least here for them to come back to and not having to, deal with these issues alone.
That's awesome. And I didn't even think about that, how creative you can just turn into a conference room into overflow space. That's awesome that you're able to do that.
Yeah.
And then what would you say is the percentage of homelessness? Like how is it being reported, right? Is there surveyors that are going out to the streets, actually talking to our neighbors? Like what's going on? How are we getting the numbers?
So that's actually kind of how they get the numbers. So once a year, there is what is called the point in time count. This is a nationwide event where outreach workers and county officials go into the community at 4 a.m. and we actually count every single person living outside. This also includes folks living in shelter spaces. This includes folks who are living in motels or, temporary living situations. So yeah, that's how it's recorded. Once a year, outreach teams go out, we do a count, we report it to the county, and then they compile the data.
Okay. And let me ask you this question, because I think that this is something that happens a lot of times, that we assume things instead of asking things. But with all the resources that we have, with all of the, not that we're LA size or anything like that, but we have shelters, we have resources, we have encampments and things like that. Why do you think that with all of that, we still have individuals sleeping on the ground outside versus in one of these shelters? What is like the main problem that you've seen or anything?
It's a complicated situation, I think. My line is, the CARES campus has a maximum capacity, right? So if the shelter is full, people don't have anywhere to go. And my line is this: if you put 600 people in one building in the best of conditions, that's a lot to manage, and the shelter, unfortunately, is not the best of conditions. So, people choose not to go into the shelters for a variety of reasons. If I had to, what I've heard, and if I had to guess, when you are living outside, you have very little choices. There's not a lot that you actually control. Where you sleep is actually one thing you can control. So if you have your own space, your own tent, things like that, it at least gives you that semblance of like, okay, I am making this decision.
Yeah, like how Jackie put in the comments here, it's a scary thing. Imagine being 16, 17, 18 years old or anything like that. They say that that's when you're an adult, but you just finished high school, or you probably never even finished high school, and now you're thrown into the world, and now you got to go figure it out. And that's a very scary thing, even for an adult that's never left the nest, right? So I can only imagine with somebody that's young and that's their first time. So yeah, scary stuff. And then, are we underestimating the amount of people that are unhoused? Like, I know you're talking about that, like, is it every year that the county does these, the data?
Yes.
The outreach? Okay. So are they underestimating the amount of people? Because mind you, right, like with our census even, we can have like 2 or 3 families in a house, right? Maybe they're undocumented, and we're not considering those numbers. So is it possible that we're really underestimating them?
I would have to guess yes, absolutely. Just anecdotally, for whatever reason, it is a lot easier for women to couch surf and be able to stay with friends, boyfriends, things like that, than men. So if I had to guess, we are underestimating, and we're also underestimating the amount of women who are unhoused.
Yeah, I can only imagine too. And then, what are some of the preventive measures that are being taken to decrease the number of people experiencing homelessness?
So, different programs are being implemented all the time, so I believe, when we have nonprofits creating, food pantries or, different housing programs, funds through the county, things like that. Those things prevent homelessness. But I think, to bring it back to the Eddy House, what we're trying to do there is prevent chronic homelessness amongst, the community, and that starts with young people, right? So if we can get them to Eddy House, address what concerns they have, it is the hope that will prevent them from being chronically homeless in the future.
And you brought up a good point. So let's say maybe the person that's between the ages of 18 and 24, right, that's still developing, do they necessarily have to be unhoused or homeless in order to get some of the programs that you all have? Because you guys have like really good programs in there. I'm just wondering if that's available to everybody else that needs that extra help without getting to that point.
Yes, absolutely. So our diversion program, like I mentioned earlier, that's actually specifically for folks who are not Eddy House clients, who haven't been to the Eddy House before, just need a little bit of help. The only requirement to access Eddy House services is that you are between the ages of 18 and 24. So even, I think of young parents who need a little bit help with food or just someone to talk to. We have mental health therapists at our facility full time, and also our workforce program totally could be able to access those services without having to stay in the shelter.
And then, so let's say somebody is above those ages. I imagine that you have alternate resources for them that maybe you can outsource to.
Yeah. So we do. So our services end for clients on their 25th birthday, and when that happens, when they age out of Eddy House, we do have various other resources that we send them to. If they still need shelter, we look into that. We essentially just point them in different directions depending on what their need is.
So I've noticed, I think about myself when I was young. I grew up in a Latino family and my mom didn't know about resources. I didn't even know what a nonprofit was until about a year ago, right? And all the awesome things that nonprofits do. How can anybody, even people outside of the nonprofit sector, how can we help out to make these resources known beyond just saying, this is where you can go? Sometimes it takes more than a nudge to get somebody to get over there to actually to go see that resource. So how can we get the word out there more effectively?
Yeah, so if you're an individual and you want to help, I would really encourage, start thinking about, our unsheltered neighbors as your community. Recognize these folks' humanity and cultivate relationships. I think that could be a great help. Smiling at an unhoused individual that you see means the world. Often folks who are unhoused are ignored, discriminated against, things like that. So by acknowledging that you see them and they see you, that does a lot. And hopefully through cultivating these relationships and pointing people in the direction of resources, once that trust is built, they'll take your word more seriously.
Awesome. That's something that I think we all have to start to practice, just to kind of like regain that humanity, and also understand that although COVID's not over, right, the major part of the pandemic was that we were all separated, right? It's kind of that anxiety of being away from people, and now we're starting to relearn that. That's a tough thing to do, right? For Absolutely. A lot of people, especially if you were by yourself in the house for the the whole entire time, right? So I think we're still learning to relearn those things, right?
Right.
And then you kind of touched on this a little bit, but if I were to encounter someone that is homeless, what would be the best way to interact with them, and how as a citizen of this community can help? So I know you're talking about like interaction, like, just treating them humanely, but what's like maybe like the baby step to get to that? What are the baby steps?
Yeah. So like I said, eye contact is big. And even just saying, hi, how's your day going? Your conversation could be as short as that, or, if someone seems to want to engage, then, you can go from there. But I would also really encourage folks to identify their own boundaries and what they're comfortable with. So maybe you aren't necessarily at that point where, you want to start engaging with folks like that. There are many ways to get involved and to help those experiencing homelessness. There are volunteer opportunities at different nonprofits. Eddy House has tons of volunteer opportunities. If you don't have time to volunteer, but maybe you have a little extra cash, monetary donations are always accepted and needed. And even, at the Eddy House, we are always accepting donations of food. Like maybe you have a big event and you have some extra food. We will always accept food donations, clothing donations, things like that.
Yeah, and then you brought up a good point, and I know that we were talking about this earlier, was when you go to a party and then you have those food trays left over, you could take it to somebody that's out in the streets, or maybe take it to one of the encampments or anything like that, and then just offer that hand. Obviously, like you were talking about, knowing your boundaries, do what you're comfortable with, and not compromise your safety, obviously, right? But definitely, I think just like that, like sometimes people want to give indirect help versus direct help, and I think that's a powerful thing. Like, just simply donating your items versus taking it to major thrift stores, maybe give it to an actual person or an actual nonprofit organization that is in need of that. And then just always asking, what is your need? Even just asking a nonprofit simply, what do you need, right? And then push comes to shove, monetary. And then as Jackie said here, I know you all are always in need of socks, right? That's something that it's a big thing. Hygiene, the things that have to be replaced, right? It's not just a one-time thing. A jacket lasts you years, whereas socks can last you a short amount of time, especially when you're jumping around from different places to live.
Right.
And then if we talked about this too, but like if somebody were looking for resources, where would they be able to find resources to help them?
So you can go to a variety of locations. So online, if you go to the Washoe County website, they do have a directory where it lists all the different resources in the area. So this includes like rental assistance, food banks, domestic violence shelters, things like that. If an individual is looking for an in-person resource, every Wednesday at the downtown library, we have what is called Community Court. And that is essentially where a lot of the outreach teams for different nonprofits come and meet in one spot. And it's basically a one-stop shop for an individual to get access to a variety of resources. So this looks like, Medicaid, food stamps, housing, rental assistance, they're all in the same spot. So if an individual needed any of those things, they could come down to Community Court, Downtown Library, 10 a.m. on Wednesdays. That would be my biggest recommendation.
That's awesome. I had never heard about that. That's really crazy. That's awesome. Is that an all-day thing, or is it?
It is 10 to 12.
10 to 12, okay. And then do you usually get people? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was also going to say recently the library started a new program where every day of the week there's a different nonprofit agency that hosts office hours. I'm doing it Mondays 1 to 4. I'm at the library, and essentially if an individual needed resources, they could ask, one of the librarians, like, hey, I'm in need of food stamps, or I am 18 and I have nowhere to go, and they could direct that individual to me or any other representative from the nonprofits.
That's awesome. You see, this is why we do these things, so that we can get the information out there. Because I work in a nonprofit, I didn't even know that myself.
Yeah, so it's brand new.
Yeah, that's so real. And it's great that it's in the downtown. I think that there's a lot more foot traffic, and also just to also remember that our libraries are there. They've always been there. They've been our central hub for resources. Before Google, we had to look inside the encyclopedia to find information, or a yellow book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Telephone book, so the yellow pages. And these are things that we're are just overlooked, not even thinking about it or anything like that. But when you don't have anything, that's a place that's free. It's a place you can use the bathroom, you can talk to people, whatever, charge your phone, as Jackie mentioned earlier too. Right. So I think we really need to make sure that we fund those places and we support them in their efforts so that they can stay running, right?
Right. Yeah, our libraries are so important.
Mm-hmm. And then, so is it usually with the what you're talking about, the downtown library, the community court, is it more so like you'll get a lot of foot traffic? Is it more of nonprofits networking with each other? Like, what is that? How does that look like?
We get a lot of foot traffic. So community court, just as a brief summary, is an alternative. It's still with the justice system, but essentially, like, if you are an individual who's unhoused and you get a ticket, one way to pay your fine would be to attend community court and get involved with different resources. But beyond, folks who have to go to community court, it is also a central meeting spot for a lot of unhoused individuals to come and get resources. A lot of them are aware, so it's common that if someone is in need of resources, they'll just stop by. There is a little bit of networking between the nonprofits, just so we're all aware of the different services we can provide, but we do see a lot of folks at community court.
Yeah, and then I would say, just as how I keep harping on this, is because not everybody is working in the nonprofit world, right? Where they can easily call. I can easily call you and be like, hey, Lee, can you help me out with this youth person that needs help finding hygiene products, whatever the case may be, right? So I think it's really important that when we're talking amongst our friends, when we're talking amongst the people that we share space with at school, work, whatever, that we talk about these things and we share this information so that it all gets intertwined and then gets disseminated to more than just us, our circle, right? I think right. Reno is small enough that we can get the word out there if we talk outside of our circles, right? And do that and mingling and getting out there and just seeing how they can help be part of the solution versus adding to the problem, right?
Right. I agree 100%.
And then this kind of ties everything together. I would say, what's the call for action? What do we do now? We talked about homelessness and unhoused neighbors. We talked about that it is rising, skyrocketing numbers, right? But what can we do? The person watching this later on, what can they do to help decrease these numbers?
So I think, the solution to homelessness, if there is a solution, I think it's going to be community, right? So like you were saying, to sort of mirror what you were saying, having these conversations, with friends, family, coworkers, someone you just met, having these conversations about, like, this is a real problem. Like, this is something that people are experiencing. These are people with lives, and they have to go through this really traumatic experience of not having a reliable place to stay. To be unhoused is incredibly traumatic. You essentially have to move yourself and your things every single month, right? Like, as sweeps happen, as people are told to move, things like that. So I think, having these conversations, talking about it, acknowledging that it's real and it's here, and these are our community members. A lot of the folks who experience homelessness are from Reno, have lived in Reno their whole lives, and just found themselves in a very unfortunate situation. So they're as much as our community as someone who is housed. And I would also encourage, if you are a voter, if you engage in the political process, to keep your nose to the ground and vote for legislation that is compassionate and empathetic to homeless individuals. If you see an anti-homeless measure, speak up about it. Go down to the city, get your voice heard, spread it on Facebook. However you can get your voice out there, I think that is really important. And also, to touch back what I was talking about earlier, talking to unhoused individuals, acknowledging them, cultivating those relationships. I know it's really intimidating. It can be really intimidating. But it is really important that we as a community fully incorporate these individuals in our community.
So we have a question here from Jackie. She says, you always hear that you're not supposed to give people money directly. Is that accurate?
Personally, in my view, I do not believe that is accurate. If you are comfortable giving an individual who is unhoused money, then I encourage you to do so. If you're uncomfortable doing that, that is a boundary you set, and that's okay. But some folks prefer action through nonprofits, and some folks prefer action that is more direct to the individual, and whichever one is more comfortable, I think they're equally helpful.
Is it, I think it's more so what Jackie was going on, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, is legalities. Is it considered as soliciting, or soliciting to somebody that's panhandling, like things like that? Would I get arrested or get a ticket if I'm giving somebody $5 on the side of the street?
I haven't personally heard of anything. I think as far as the legal part of it, I believe it is illegal to panhandle, but I don't think it's illegal to give someone money. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's something, and then that brings me back to saying, like, talk to your local police department, see what they see. They can see something completely different from what you see. And this is why they're formulating their opinions on this. So instead of us assuming these things, I think that we just have to have those tough conversations with local officials, with our neighbors themselves, like,
right.
Versus like saying, well, they're the problem, they're bringing the problem to us, or anything like that.
Well, and to bring it back to you're not supposed to give money to unhoused individuals, I believe that comes from the thought process that people choose to be homeless, so that by giving them money, they are enabled in their homelessness. But a lot of the times, say you are unhoused and you lost your ID, you lost your social security card, you lost your birth certificate, you lost all your essential documents. You have no way to get a job. You also don't have a reliable address, right? So if you have no address, if you have no essential documents, you can't obtain employment. So how is one supposed to get money? So yeah, that I would like to offer that perspective as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is you never know. Even if the person's not even to that point, you never know what somebody's going through. Mm-hmm. And that's why you should never assume things. Just ask questions, pick people's brains. I even encourage to talk to the community outside in the streets and say, what is it that you need? What would you say to yourself 5 years ago? And then maybe this will be a tool that we can use to empower our youth and help them because they're our future, right? Mm-hmm. If we can't help our future, then we're just setting a pathway of damage, and then that's it. There's nothing good.
Right.
So to wrap it up, I want to say that I appreciate you so much, Haley, for bringing up this topic. It's super important. I mean, this is important. This has been important since the beginning, right? And it's just us addressing it now is just not even scratching the surface of it. There's so much that needs to happen, and it happens with the community, as you said. Is there anything you want to add to this before we close out?
Yeah, I'll just throw this out there. If you know someone who's 18 to 24 and struggling, please reach out to the Eddy House. It's eddyhouse.org. And if there are any individuals watching this who are interested in learning more about outreach or learning more about how they can directly help folks experiencing homelessness, I'm going to throw my email out there. You can reach me. It's Haley, HAILEY, at eddyhouse.org. You can email me with any questions that you have, and I'd be more than happy to have a conversation about that.
Thank you so much, Haley. This was so informative. I hope that our community and beyond watches it and is able to, pick up and see what's going on and be able to help out and just be a part of the solution, right? As we've been talking about.
Yeah, that's my hope as well.
Please be on the lookout for Northern Nevada Marches Forward, and our upcoming outreach events will be at Juneteenth, and then our next Education and Action series will be determined. So please keep a lookout on all of our social media outlets on Instagram, Facebook, and then just let us know if there's anything that you need, and hopefully all of us as a community, we can get together and solve the problem.
All right. Thank you so much, Yolanda. I really appreciated this.
Thank you, Haley.